3,700 years ago, a powerful city in the Jordan Valley was erased in an instant. Not by war, not by plague, not by earthquake, but by a blast so violent it melted pottery into glass, stripped buildings from their foundations, and left behind a scar in the earth that scientists are still trying to explain. Some researchers say the evidence resembles the aftermath of a nuclear detonation. And here's what makes this unsettling. The only ancient text that describes an event like this is the Book of Genesis. When archaeologists began analyzing the destruction layer of a massive ancient city north of the Dead Sea, they weren't expecting controversy. But when their findings were published, the academic world split. Some scientists called it groundbreaking. Others challenged the Airburst calculations, questioned the dating methods, debated whether such temperatures were even possible without a crater. The discussion became intense because the data pointed to something extraordinary. An explosion in the sky, an airburst powerful enough to destroy an entire civilization in seconds. If true, it would mean that nearly 4,000 years ago, something catastrophic happened here, something violent enough to burn itself into human memory. If you stand at the Dead Sea today, you are standing at the lowest point on Earth. The water is thick with salt. The landscape feels desolate. The air hangs heavy and still. Nothing lives in the sea itself. It feels like a graveyard. But 4,000 years ago, this region looked very different. The Jordan Valley was one of the most fertile places in the ancient world. Green, well-watered, positioned along major trade routes connecting Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Levant. It was valuable land. According to Genesis, this plain was like the garden of the Lord. It wasn't wasteland. It was wealth. And in the center of that wealth, Scripture describes a powerful city, Sodom. For decades, archaeologists searched for Sodom at the southern end of the Dead Sea. They uncovered a site called Bab ed-Dra, massive fortifications, evidence of fire, a vast cemetery. Headlines declared the mystery solved. But there was a problem. The destruction at that site occurred centuries too early. The dates did not align with the biblical timeline of Abraham. For many scholars, that was enough. Case closed. Sodom was legend. Then, in 2005, archaeologist Dr. Stephen Collins took a different approach. Instead of starting with assumptions, he returned to the text itself. Genesis describes Lot looking across the plain from near Bethel. The passage specifies that he looked east, not south. That directional detail mattered. So Collins shifted the search north of the Dead Sea. And there, rising from the plain, stood an enormous mound called el-Hammam. At first glance, it looked like any other ancient ruin, but excavation revealed something far more significant. During the Middle Bronze Age, el-Hammam was massive. It was far larger than Jerusalem at the time, larger than Jericho, surrounded by defensive walls 4 meters thick and nearly 50 feet high. This was not a village. It was a regional capital. Tens of thousands of people may have lived inside its walls. If Genesis describes Sodom as wealthy and influential, this city fits that profile. But size alone proves nothing. Every ancient city eventually falls. To identify Sodom, you don't just need ruins. You need the moment everything ended. And then the excavation team uncovered something they did not expect. A dense destruction layer nearly 1.5 meters thick. A sudden, dark line in the earth. Above it, evidence of life. Below it, silence. At first, it appeared to be the aftermath of war. But then the anomalies began to surface. Pottery shards were not simply broken, they were partially melted. Mudbricks were not just collapsed, they had been blasted apart. The distribution of debris suggested force from above, not from invading armies. Something violent had happened here. Something fast, something hot. What the excavation team uncovered inside that destruction layer changed everything. This was not an ordinary burn. In a typical ancient siege, you find scattered ash, charred beams, collapsed walls, signs of prolonged fire. But this layer was different. It was dense, uniform, violent, and the materials inside it told a story of extreme heat. It wasn't just the pottery that melted. The mud bricks liquefied, plaster dripped down walls like candle wax. Even fragments of building stone showed signs of surface melting. This was not a fire fueled by wood. This was a thermal pulse. Laboratory analysis revealed that some materials had been exposed to temperatures exceeding 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt iron, hot enough to vaporize organic material in seconds. And then came the most startling discovery. Inside the melted glass fragments, scientists found partially melted zircon crystals. Zircon is one of the most heat-resistant minerals on Earth. It survives volcanic eruptions. It endures extreme geological pressure. To damage zircon in this way requires extraordinary temperatures far beyond what a Bronze Age kiln or city fire could produce. But heat alone wasn't the only anomaly. Under powerful microscopes, researchers identified microscopic diamonds known as diamondoids. These form when organic material is subjected to sudden, crushing pressure. Heat and pressure, combined, in the same layer. Next to these diamonds, traces of melted platinum, iridium, and nickel were detected, elements more commonly associated with extraterrestrial material than with the soil of the Jordan Valley. The evidence pointed upward, not outward. There was no crater, no impact hole in the ground, which meant if this was caused by a space object, it did not strike the Earth directly. It exploded in the air, an airburst. To understand what that means, we have to look at the only modern comparison we have. In 1908, over the remote forests of Siberia, a space rock exploded approximately 5 miles above the Earth's surface. The explosion flattened 80 million trees across more than 800 square miles. Eyewitnesses were knocked off their feet 40 miles away. Windows shattered. The shock wave circled the planet. This was the Tunguska event. No crater, just devastation from above. Now imagine a similar explosion but directly over a densely populated Bronze Age city. Researchers calculated that if an airburst occurred roughly 2.5 miles above el-Hammam, the thermal pulse would have instantly raised ground temperatures beyond 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. First, the flash, a light so intense it would blind anyone looking toward it. Then the heat. Clothing would ignite, wood would combust, human tissue would vaporize almost instantly. Seconds later, the shockwave. Moving faster than the speed of sound, it would strike the city like a wall of compressed air. Walls would shear, roofs would lift and disintegrate, mud brick homes would collapse into dust, and the archaeological record at Tal el-Hammam reflects precisely that kind of force. The upper portions of defensive walls appear to have been stripped away. Debris patterns suggest energy coming from above and slightly southwest of the city. Not from invading armies at ground level, but from the sky. And then there is the salt. When scientists analyzed soil samples from the destruction layer, they found abnormally high salt concentrations. In some areas, levels reached as high as 25%. For comparison, wheat struggles to grow in soil with more than 1% salinity. An explosion over the Dead Sea, one of the saltiest bodies of water on Earth, could have displaced superheated brine across the surrounding valley. A wave of salt-laden debris settling over farmland, poisoning it, rendering it sterile. For centuries, archaeological surveys show that after this destruction event, the surrounding region remained largely uninhabited for nearly 700 years. A fertile plain became silent, not because of myth, but because crops would not grow. The land itself had been altered. For those who approach this purely from geology, the airburst model explains the data. Heat, pressure, salt, sudden abandonment. But for those who approach it through the lens of Scripture, another detail stands out. Genesis describes fire and brimstone raining down from heaven, cities overthrown in a moment, land rendered barren. If God governs the laws of nature, then an event like this would not require supernatural suspension of physics. It would require timing and purpose. The evidence does not force a theological conclusion, but it does remove the assumption that the biblical description was scientifically impossible. Something catastrophic happened here, something that burned so deeply into collective memory that it was written down, preserved, and transmitted across millennia. And the destruction layer is only part of the story, because buildings are one thing, the human cost is another, and what archaeologists found among the remains reveals just how instantaneous this event truly was. Archaeologists expected to find burials, carefully arranged skeletons, ritual placement, signs of mourning. That isn't what they found. The human remains discovered within the destruction layer were fragmented, scattered, violently displaced. In some cases, only partial skeletal elements were recovered, a lower half without the upper body. Bone fragments embedded in collapsed debris, pieces that appeared to have been torn apart before they ever reached the ground. This was not slow death. This was instantaneous. The positioning of the remains suggests people were caught in ordinary life. No signs of organized evacuation. No defensive formations. No mass graves prepared in advance. Whatever happened here gave no warning. Imagine a normal afternoon in a Bronze Age city. A woman kneeling beside an oven, preparing bread. Merchants weighing grain in the marketplace. Children running along the inner wall of the city. Then a sudden flash, brighter than lightning, brighter than anything they had ever seen. In less than a second, the thermal pulse would ignite clothing and exposed skin. Air itself would superheat. Breath would turn to fire in the lungs. Moments later, the shockwave. A concussive wall of compressed air slamming through streets, tearing stone from mortar, hurling bodies through collapsing structures. There would have been no time to run, no time to pray, just light, heat, and force. Some researchers estimate that tens of thousands of people may have lived within the greater el-Hammam region at the time of destruction. The exact number will always be debated, but the scale of the city suggests a population far beyond a small village. And then silence. Unlike Pompeii, where volcanic ash fell over hours and preserved people in frozen poses, this destruction was faster and more violent. Pompeii suffocated. El-Hammam appears to have been obliterated. The difference matters, because it aligns with something described in Genesis that has often been dismissed as exaggeration. The text says the cities were overthrown in a moment. For centuries, critics have argued that ancient writers used dramatic language to describe ordinary disasters. But the archaeological evidence suggests this may not have been ordinary at all. If an airburst occurred directly above the city, the window between first flash and fatal shockwave would have been measured in seconds, perhaps less. The force required to fragment bone in this way matches what we observe in modern high-energy blast zones. Again, there is debate. Some scholars argue that collapse and later disturbance could account for fragmented remains. Others counter that the pattern of breakage is consistent with sudden high-pressure impact. The discussion continues. But no one disputes that the destruction was abrupt, and it did not stop at the city walls. Archaeological surveys of the surrounding Jordan Valley reveal something even more puzzling. After this event, settlement density drops sharply. Farms disappear. Villages vanish. For nearly 7 centuries, large portions of the valley remain sparsely inhabited. In one of the most fertile regions of the ancient Near East, life stalled. If the soil had indeed been saturated with salt from a massive displaced wave of Dead Sea brine, agriculture would have failed. Crops would wither. Livestock would struggle. People would leave. This is not speculation alone. Soil analysis confirms elevated salinity levels within the destruction layer, salt that would have taken generations to leach out naturally, which raises a difficult question. If this was simply an unfortunate cosmic accident, it was one of extraordinary timing. A major urban center, at the height of its power, destroyed in seconds, land rendered barren, memory preserved in text. For people of faith, the question becomes deeper. If God governs the universe, its stars, its gravity, its physics, could an event like this be both natural in mechanism and purposeful in meaning? The biblical account does not describe tectonic plates shifting or armies invading. It describes fire from heaven, sulfur, overthrow, and a land that would not recover. The archaeological record at el-Hammam does not prove theology, but it challenges the assumption that the biblical narrative was physically impossible. Something happened here that ancient observers would have struggled to describe. How does a Bronze Age witness explain a blinding flash, a deafening explosion from the sky, and fire raining down in fragments? What vocabulary would they use? They would describe what they saw: fire, brimstone, heaven opened. And then there is another detail from Genesis that has long puzzled readers: Lot's wife turning into a pillar of salt. For centuries, this line has been treated as pure symbolism. Yet the Dead Sea region is filled with massive salt formations, pillars sculpted by wind and erosion. More importantly, if a shock wave displaced superheated brine across the valley, salt deposits would have settled over structures and terrain. The symbolism may be theological, but the environment is real, and the valley still bears scars. Still, not everyone is convinced. Critics argue that the evidence for extraterrestrial material is not conclusive. They question whether the melted minerals could have formed through localized industrial activity or unknown geological processes. Carbon. 1-4 dating of destruction layers is notoriously complex. Contamination is possible. Interpretations vary. This is how science works. Claims are tested, challenged, refined. The airburst theory is currently the leading explanation for the extreme heat and pressure observed at el-Hammam, but it remains a model, not an absolute. And yet, regardless of theological interpretation, one conclusion stands firm. A powerful Middle Bronze Age city was violently destroyed. The heat was extreme. The force came from above. The land was altered, and human habitation ceased for generations. The question is no longer whether something catastrophic happened. The question is how we interpret it. Was it a random cosmic collision in a dangerous universe? Or was it an event allowed, or even directed within a framework of divine justice? That answer depends on worldview. But the physical layer of ash and glass does not depend on belief. It exists, buried beneath the soil, waiting to be examined. And as excavations continue, the debate is far from over. For generations, the story of Sodom has been treated as a moral warning, a symbol, a lesson about corruption and consequence. Many assumed it belonged to theology alone, not history. But beneath the soil north of the Dead Sea, there is a layer of ash, melted glass, and shattered stone that refuses to remain symbolic. It is physical, measurable, testable. Something catastrophic happened in the Middle Bronze Age. A city of significant size and influence was destroyed in seconds. Extreme heat, sudden pressure, a shockwave from above, salt saturating the land, centuries of abandonment. Those are not theological claims. They are archaeological observations. The interpretation, however, is where the divide begins. Some researchers maintain that this was a rare but natural cosmic event, a space rock entering Earth's atmosphere at precisely the wrong place and time, a tragic coincidence in an unpredictable universe. Others see something more, because the details preserved in Genesis are unusually specific. Fire from heaven, sulfur, cities overthrown in a moment, a fertile plain rendered barren. If ancient writers were inventing mythology, it is remarkable how closely the physical evidence mirrors the description, not in poetic generalities, but in mechanism: a thermal event from the sky, instant destruction, environmental aftermath. The archaeological record does not compel belief, but it does challenge dismissal. For centuries, skeptics argued that such a destruction was scientifically impossible. There was no known mechanism, no plausible explanation. Now there is. An airburst is not supernatural in mechanism. It is physics, gravity, velocity, energy, But if one believes that the universe operates under divine sovereignty, then physics itself is not random. It is governed, which reframes the question. Not, could this happen naturally? But, could natural forces serve a greater purpose? That question moves beyond excavation trenches and laboratory reports. It moves into worldview. Consider the timing. A powerful city at the height of its influence, destroyed instantly, memory preserved in oral tradition, written down centuries later, transmitted across civilizations. If this was chance, it was extraordinary chance. If it was providence expressed through natural law. Either way, the event was real. The glass exists. The salt remains. The destruction layer is still there. Civilizations rise believing they are secure. Walls are built thick. Economies grow strong. Influence expands. And yet history shows repeatedly that security is fragile, not only morally, but cosmically. The Tunguska explosion in 1908 occurred over remote Siberian forest. Had it happened over a major city, modern history would read differently. The Earth exists in a dynamic system. Asteroids cross our orbit. Energy moves through the atmosphere. We are, at all times, more vulnerable than we like to admit. The ruins of el-Hammam stand as a reminder of that vulnerability. But for people of faith, they may also represent something deeper, a reminder that actions have consequences. That power does not equal permanence. That judgment, however understood, can arrive suddenly. Genesis records that the cities were overthrown. The archaeological layer suggests that overthrow was not gradual. It was immediate, and perhaps that is why the story endured. Not merely as a moral lesson, but as a memory of a day when the sky flashed white, the ground shook, and a thriving civilization vanished. The earth preserved the evidence. The text preserved the account. And thousands of years later, we are still standing at the edge of that question. Was it accident? Was it judgment? Was it both natural forces operating within a moral universe? The answer depends on what one believes about the nature of reality itself. But one conclusion remains beyond debate. On that day, nearly 4,000 years ago, something happened in the Jordan Valley that changed the course of that region for centuries. The land was scarred, the city was erased, and the memory was never forgotten. The glass does not lie. The soil does not exaggerate. Something extraordinary occurred here, and whether viewed through the lens of science or scripture, it stands as a sobering reminder. Civilization feels permanent, but it is not. We are not as untouchable as we imagine. And sometimes, the sky is not as distant as it seems.